Azikiwee, welcome to Diaspora Food Stories. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Good. And you are joining us from San Francisco.
I am. As you can tell, I am sitting out in the quietest place I have, which is outside in my vehicle.
Wow. Well, I'm so excited to connect. We have a mutual friend, Phyllis Bowie, who just a Rise Up fan, who
Big up,
first,
Phillips.
yes, who introduced you to me and just love your story. And so excited to get into that today.
Well, thank you. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be here.
Thank you. So let's just start from the beginning. Born and raised California, Bay Area native?
No, I was born in New Orleans,
Okay.
and then we came to San Francisco under duress,
Mm.
and when I was 5. Um, where like, do you want me to like go into like the what's what? Like
You can
what
share
got us
as
here?
much as you want to share, as much as you feel
Okay.
comfortable sharing.
Yeah, so my father was a drummer, and he traveled around the world doing drums for the Neville Brothers.
Nice.
And when he came back, um, kind of, my mom didn't really know that he had, while he was traveling, he had started doing heroin.
Mm.
And so then she was kind of like, where's all the money?
Mm.
Like, and he
Mhm.
had used up all the money that he had made while he was on tour.
Okay.
And so they started kind of arguing, and then he flipped out and beat my mom close to death.
Mm.
And so when she got out of the hospital, the battered women's shelter sent us. They said, well, we should get you away, because if it was this bad and this was the first time, it's only going to get worse. So
Mm.
they put us on a Greyhound bus, my mom and her 3 kids, and sent us to San Francisco. And when we got here, um, there was something messed up in the paperwork, or something messed up. People didn't know we were coming. So we were homeless for quite a while before anyone figured out that we needed help or we could get services. And so, yeah, so then San Francisco became our new home, and we didn't really have anything. And then we worked our way from that to my mom ended up getting us a place and getting into college and putting herself through college. And, we were all the classic, like, live in the worst place, on
Mhm.
welfare, struggling. But she taught us how to be really good people and how to care about everyone around us. And,
Mhm.
you know, and that's my humble beginnings, which really influence and change the way I think about the world and what I want to do in the world and how I want to help people.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you very much. I know that's very hard, so thank you so much. So growing up, what are, San Francisco, what were some of the things that maybe you noticed the difference between Louisiana and the Bay Area initially, maybe?
Well, I think I was really shell shocked, 5-year-old, dealing with all the things that come along with, having your family blow up,
Hmm.
going to a new place. I do say that I really fell in love with San Francisco. When I got to be about 11 is when my mom realized that was like during the crack epidemic.
Hmm.
Um, and that's when she realized that where we could afford to live and being little black children probably wasn't going to work out really good for us. So she took us to a place called Chico, California,
Okay. Yep.
which is a very quaint, beautiful little town up in Northern California, but it is not very diverse. So from going from New Orleans, then to San Francisco, feeling like I started to become my self that I really feel that I am, then to move to Chico and be like one of like 5 black kids in the entire town,
Hmm.
was very discombobulating, to say the least. It was hard on my mind. So
Hmm.
I think a certain amount of my, like people, they say they have fight or flight.
Hmm.
And I don't have a whole lot of flight. I have a whole lot of fight. So I think a lot of that was really standing up for myself and not allowing myself to buy into what the world said I was,
Right.
in Chico. and I graduated from high school, and I basically left the next day. Like,
Okay.
I couldn't wait to leave. As much as I love my family and wanted to be there for my family, as they had been there for me, I really wanted to be okay with myself and see the world and not feel like I wasn't okay.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I moved to Santa Rosa, where I went to junior college. And really, I just moved to Santa Rosa because it was close to the city, but I couldn't afford to live in the city.
Okay.
And so I made my way out there and kind of became the next version of myself there.
Okay. Okay. So before we pick up there, food. Let's talk about food in the early days, and now it's playing out in your life right now. So.
Yeah, food is love to me. Um, like we didn't have a whole lot, but my mom was a good cook and
Hmm.
she really wanted to make sure that we felt cared about. So the amount of food that she cooked for us, how she cooked for us, like, it was basically like pay our rent, buy food, and then we could figure out if we had enough money for lights.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, so it became a main part. Like my mom worked a lot, and so she taught me how to cook at a young age.
Okay.
Um, I was, the eldest, so I was like, there were a lot of times where she'd be working and telling me how to make one of her dishes, and I would cook for the family.
Hmm.
And there's a
Hmm.
certain thing that kind of happens where you feel really good about yourself, and you make something that tastes wonderful, and yeah, people get super excited, and it kind of locks in like, oh, I can make people happy with food. I can feed my
Hmm.
family, and
Hmm.
and and then if you even remotely get good at it, people love it, so it just makes you happy.
Awesome. So going back to Santa Rosa and like you said, becoming this next version of yourself, what did that look like for you?
um well, I spent a lot of time kind of like trying my best not to feel like I wasn't good enough, right? Like,
Mhm.
when everything around you is like, you shouldn't be here. Why are you here? You're not okay. You know, even in school, I had a really hard time in school with the teachers.
Mhm.
Um, but, the world puts upon us, um, and I had to fight back to feel seen and to feel like I wasn't what they said I was.
Right.
And that's a lot to deal with on top of growing up and trying to be your own little person.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I had a bunch of struggles with that. And then by leaving, I just realized if I stayed in Chico, I was always going to be not okay. And
Okay.
so I just wanted to relocate and go to a place where they didn't have a negative idea of what I should be. And then I realized later that I didn't need to give anyone the power over me.
Mhm.
Let them have control over what I thought of myself. Like what they
Mhm.
thought is what they thought, and that ain't got nothing to do with who I am. But
Ah.
that took a lot more. That was more adult me,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
kid me. Kid me
Right.
was just like, I need to get out of here.
Right.
Adult me was, I'm trying my best to be okay no matter where I am.
And I love that you recognize that mental right there, right? In your mental health. And like you said, just knowing this was not the space for you in Chico and knowing
Yeah.
something different out there. So definitely commend you on that. So career-wise, walk us through some of the earlier years.
So I used to coach gymnastics when I left Chico and went to Santa Rosa. I had done a lot of gymnastics when I was younger. I was really
Okay.
late to it. I'd really late to it, but I got really good really quick. I have a tendency to hyper focus. I'm a little OCD.
Okay.
So once I lock in on something and decide that I like it, then I'm all in.
Hmm.
And so I was going to junior college and coaching gymnastics, um, working with kids, and just trying to get them to focus in. And as being someone who's really ADHD and dyslexic, the physicality of moving my body was very freeing for me.
Mhm.
Sitting in a desk and having to read, this huge books was like, it was really hard on my self-esteem. It was really hard on my brain.
Okay.
Um, once I realized I got diagnosed as being ADHD and being diagnosed as dyslexic, then I was kind of like, oh, it is me, but it's not like, I kind of got tricked into thinking I was stupid,
Mm-hmm.
because I was having such a hard time with the way everyone else learns. But once I realized I could learn the way I learned and
Mm-hmm.
kind of got empowered to do that, then I could learn. I just basically started teaching myself all sorts of things. And then I realized, oh, I really like learning and I really like school.
Right.
I
Right.
just had to figure out how to make it work for me. So when I was in junior college, I started coaching gymnastics. And then from coaching gymnastics, I had some kids come in and they wanted me to teach them. They were a little bit older. I taught their little sister, and they wanted me to teach them gymnastics because they were skaters and they were rollerbladers and they wanted to jump on handrails and do flips. And since I was a gymnast and I was like this, 6'3" black dude with dreadlocks, they were like, well, maybe that guy will teach us how to do these crazy flips. And so they came and told me what they wanted, and I started teaching them. And one of them was kind of he was just contrary. Like, what if I said black, he said white, right? He was just always arguing with me, um, in a good way. He's like, well, that's not what I saw in the videos. I said, well, why don't you bring me these videos? I'll watch them, and if I think I can teach you what I see, then
Mm-hmm.
I'll. Um, and so I started watching it, and it was all these guys doing flips on rollerblades and skating half pipes, and I got amazed. I was like, I didn't even know you could do that, and I
Wow.
loved skating. I used to be a quad skater, and I loved all like the roll bounce kind of vibe, like dancing on skates. I was all about it. Me and my brother
Mm-hmm.
and sister used to put
Mm-hmm.
together routines.
Uh-oh, watch
uh
out.
yeah, we were serious. And so then all of a sudden I was like, well, I'll go do this stuff because I skated too. And I was like, well, I'll teach you guys how to do what I can teach you, and you teach me how to do the other stuff. And so next thing you know, I was out skating with them, and I was really athletic, so I picked it up really fast, and I started skating and I started doing like competitions, and then I got sponsored, and then I turned into a professional rollerblader, and that was like the next, I don't know,
What?
20 something years of my life was jumping on handrails. And
What?
yeah, that's where that's where my stars really changed, because I was this kid who was trying to get through college and thinking about what I could be, as this kind of oddball,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden this physicality thing came up where they're like, hey, you're really good at this. Do you want to get paid to skate? We're going to send you to Germany. We're going to send you to, I
Wow.
was like, wait, you going to pay me to skate? And so then I became a professional skater, and my life completely, like, it went from, sleeping on people's floors and not having no money
Uh-huh.
to getting flown and being in commercials and jumping on handrails and being in the X Games and doing
What?
all sorts of stuff. So yeah, so that's
Amazing.
my whole life changed. I didn't even know you could get paid to do something fun. I thought I was gonna have to dig ditches my whole life.
I hear
Um,
you. Well, hey,
so
seeing what is it, cornhole, and just throwing a beanbag, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm missing out on something here. Okay.
you're like, you make how much doing what?
Exactly. Okay. So no, that is wonderful. So you say you did that for about 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, let's see, I started teaching them probably when I was 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
I probably started uh, skating just like amateur in between 19 to probably like 2021. Then I got sponsored.
Mm.
And then I basically, for the next 20 years until I was 30, 32, 33,
Okay.
I was a, sponsored skater. I built skate parks. I
Wow.
judged events. I emceed, like I'd be one of those guys. Now I used to be I used to have dreads, and I was one of those dudes that'd be like, Tony Hawk, you just landed in 900. What are you gonna do? I was like a sport reporter.
Mm-hmm.
Like me and Sal Masakela, I was out there. I was doing the thing.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. So what was that turning point that you said, you know what, time to move on to something different or next?
Well, I got married and I had kids.
Okay.
And then I was just like, my whole life was, like I was like Peter Pan. I did my best to be a part of a world that it's a youth sport.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gained a certain amount of notoriety,
Mm-hmm.
and people knew who I was and respected me for what I had done in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
But you get to be a certain age where you're kind of like, like I don't want to be gone all the time and miss my kids, and so my whole job was basically to not be here. I always got paid to travel and got paid to go places, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
I stepped off the merry-go-round, and the merry-go-round kept spinning, and then I had to reassess who I was, what I was trying to do. And then the only thing that ever really was in my heart, I always had this dream that if I didn't do athletics, I would be a chef. So
Nice.
then I went to culinary school and started working in kitchens, private chefing, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of became a knife for hire, where I would go and do big events, because I realized I could make as much work in 1 or 2 days for myself or with a crew of people that had budget than I
Mm-hmm.
could working every single day, all day, in a kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I once again wanted to make sure I was around my kids, so I
Right.
didn't want to. It's very intense, which I have now learned through doing Rize Up. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when I started Rize Up, I was working 20-hour days. I just happened to be working 20-hour days during the pandemic when I was in the house with my family, so it didn't seem too crazy because I was like, well, I got to see everybody all day.
Right. Right.
It wasn't until I was working 20-hour days where I was sleeping at the bakery and not seeing my family, where all of a sudden I was like, okay, I gotta mix this up.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So then you're private chefing all the way up until 2020?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then 2020 happens, and what takes place for you then? As
Poof.
we witness the
Vamoose.
murder of George Floyd. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no. So I was just doing bread. Um, like I started off on a text thread.
Mm-hmm.
I put together a text thread with other friends, our kids' friends from school, and some other people. We basically made like a quarantine meal text thread where we were like, oh, here's how you do a reverse sear, and here's a recipe, and this is what I did, and oh, here's how you make your own pasta, and this is, we were just trying to keep community with other foodies.
Because at this time, everything for you stopped business-wise, right?
Oh, completely. Like it was, I normally did 7-course meals with wine pairings for 12 to 24 people
Mm-hmm.
in your house. Like, so I would, work out a menu. I would, go to the market. I would buy everything. I would prep everything. I would
Mm-hmm.
load in, and then I would bring a sommelier and a server, and we would just, give you a, 5-star meal at your home.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would like to say, "Oh, you're a caterer," and I'm like, "Nah, caterer kind of feeds like past apps," and I
Mm-hmm.
would do like full on courses, like, here's your fresh line caught mango ceviche with, fresh caught halibut, and I would come out and explain what I
And yours
had
is more
done, why I had
intimate,
done it.
right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of a show to it as well. Like, you go out and you're explaining your food to people, and making them feel a part of it, especially when you've worked special with whoever the host is to work out a menu that they really love.
Right.
So that kind of care, that kind of quality, attention to detail is not easily come by. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you go to Gary Danko, or you go to Spruce, or you go to, you know like, there's like 20 restaurants I can name, like that they do what they do,
Mm-hmm.
but to have that quality, and it's not just anything I do, it's custom for you, that comes with a cost, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and I really enjoyed it, and I felt like I was doing a great job, and I was earning, and I felt great. And then presto changeo, poof,
Mm-hmm.
none of that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was making sure my kids were on their Zoom calls for school every day. I was my family started gaining weight because I was feeding them like all super great food every single day. And they were like, "What are we having tonight, Dad?" I'm like, "Oh, we having this, we having that."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, and then inevitably that foodie thread of quarantine meals turned into somebody was like, "I'm gonna make sourdough," and then everyone glommed on and like, "Yeah, let's make sourdough." I felt
Uh-oh.
like everybody on the entire planet decided they were gonna make sourdough, you know, and I was like, "All right, I'm cool off that. I don't do that," you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things that I realized, you know, like even though I've done a lot of things that, you know, we don't do, like black people, the amount of times that I got told, "Oh, black people don't do that," like
Mm-hmm.
I I thought I had like missed the special black people book, because there were all these things that I would try to do, and everybody would just tell me that we don't do it. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, I didn't know that. I mean, seems like it would be fun." And like, "Oh yeah, that's weird. We don't do that," you know.
Wow.
And so I started to realize that like I during the pandemic, when all this was happening, there were all these things about myself that I didn't really know why I did it or why I didn't do it. I just was like, I realized I'd never had a black teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that a lot of the things that I chose to do, I never saw anyone else look like me do it. It's like, you know, like if I told you, "Hey, let's go ride horses," right? You'd be like, I don't know about that. But then there's a whole group of brothers and sisters who like that's what they do, and they do great. And the whole idea of cowboys was basically spun out of us, but
Mm-hmm.
yet we have been systematically pulled out of, or we don't do that. And I'm like, so I just was going through all this kind of internal struggle in my mind about who I am, what I do, what I love, what I want to be. I think if you give somebody enough time, they'll start coming to these cross moments in their brain where they're like, "Why am I this way? Why do I do that?" I've never really had that time. I've been working my whole life. I
Mm-hmm.
have been busy making sure that I could survive, and so I didn't really have the luxury of like the time to think about what I do and why. And then that turned into that also happened to be just about the same time of the murder of George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really would say that the murder of George Floyd brought up a lot of trauma in my brain, and I was both furious and sad. I spend very little time being sad. I realized that part of my defense mechanisms is like, ain't nobody gonna come help you.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pull yourself up, get your stuff together, and keep moving, right? And a lot of acceptance of that's just the way it is. And for some reason, the murder of George Floyd like broke a part of my brain that was just like, I'm tired of always having to be the one that makes it okay. I'm tired of having to answer people's questions. I'm tired of having to be okay and pretend like this shit is not oppressive.
Right.
And it made me really, really, really sad and really, really,
Okay.
really angry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so then the only thing that seemed to fix it is when I was go downstairs and work on trying to get better at this random thing of making bread, which I in the first part didn't really even want to do.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden I realized that when I was doing it, I was really happy. It made me happy. And it was really crazy. It was a surprise to me because I'm like, at the beginning I didn't even want to do it.
Okay.
Um, but then the thing that made me really happy, this Zen like act of making something beautiful, made other people happy. So when I handed people the bread that I had made, whether it was my wife or my kids or my next door neighbor, I would pack them up and I would go around like and leave them on people's porches with a little note, because it was traumatic time in the world. And I thought, well, maybe if I make them bread, maybe it'll make them happy, right?
Right.
And then people started wanting to purchase it because I was taking pictures and putting it online. And that kind of surprised me. The amount of loaves that I gave away freely because I didn't really value them or value what I could do. I was just like, no, I'll give it to you. Like, it's, you know, I'm not gonna make you pay for it, you know? And then one of my friends in Brooklyn, he said, hey, you know, why don't you, I'll pay you, send me some bread. And I was like, oh man, like, I don't think so. It's not good. It's going to mold, or I don't know what's going to, and he was like, man, it's my money. Just send me the damn bread. I was like, okay. So I sent the bread. And right before I sent it, I took a picture and I said, I can't believe people are paying me to ship them bread. And literally the next day, I had like requests for like 60 loaves. and I completely was like, I don't even know how to make that many loaves. Like, I was still making like 4 at a time, right? And so I was like, okay, well, here's a challenge. I can work on trying to figure out how to make 60 loaves. And so I just kept working on it. I figured first come first. You know, I went from making 4 at a time. I got up to making 10 at a time.
Wow.
You know, and then it just kept getting bigger and bigger. I bought a bigger mixer. I bought ovens to put on my back porch. And it just,
Wow.
you know, I got up to doing, I think the most I could do was 24 an hour. Then people started putting it in the shops and stores, contacting me. I was selling it online, and I got up to about 120 to 140, you know, per day at my house. And that was when my wife was like, she was hilarious. She was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. You should go somewhere else.
I love you, but
yeah, she's like, wow, this is so great, babe. Like, you need to go somewhere. So with that, I opened up, I found a spot, and it was like a dilapidated kitchen that was in this big, huge building that no one was using because it was COVID. And I basically took all the money I had made for the first bit, and I invested in a new oven. And I just said, well, worst case worst is I'm going to go here, and if it doesn't work, then I'll sell the oven and I'll move back to the house, you know. And what I learned by having a place that I could do whatever I wanted when I wanted and could work long hours was I had barely scratched the surface of what was possible. And it just lit me up that I felt so seen because I was unapologetically like my own self doing things for the reasons. And people were like, we love it. And I was like I'm gonna like get all sad. I was like, it was the first time I ever felt like I had the wind at my back, really like I could do things that I thought were beautiful and people were excited by it. And I was like, oh, like I could do this for the rest of my life, you know? So
nice. Let's talk about the name. How'd you come up with the name?
Well, so if you're trying to, at the beginning, my first bunch of loaves that I made were not very, they did not rise. They were very flat. And so you work really, really hard on making this loaf. You know, it takes 6-8 hours. You put it in the fridge. So like 24 hours later, you bake this loaf off, and it's just like, and you're like, what? And so, yeah, wah. And so I was trying to get what they call oven spring, or get it to rise. And that is spelled RISE. But right before the pandemic, I had taken my family to go see Alexander Hamilton. Or Hamilton. And we had been listening to the soundtrack of Hamilton. And the day that I cracked the code where I finally got a loaf that looked beautiful, that I was so excited, the song was on, and it was like, when you're living on your knees, you gotta rise up. And I was like, I started singing it, you know, And I was like, rise up, rise up. And I instantly was like, oh, that's what I should call it. You know, I should call it Rise Up. And then my name's Azikiwee, and everyone calls me Z. So then I just took the S out and replaced it with a Z.
Nice.
And it was very, it had a lot of meaning to me, because it was also when it was the first time that I had ever really seen the amount of people that were out protesting for, because of the death, the murder of George Floyd. And so it felt like there were all these people, all the diaspora, all these different kinds of people. And I felt like it was really the first time where it wasn't just Black people saying, hell no. It was like the public in general just being like, we've got to fix this. And I don't know if I can say this on your thing, but they were like, fuck this. We ain't dealing with it. Like, we're not taking it no more. And I felt a certain amount of sadness, anger, and shame around the fact that I was so mad that I'm so big that I'm like, I can't go protest, right? Like, I'm like, something's bad's gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just was like, I'm not gonna be a positive part of change if I'm going out as angry as I am right now.
Right.
And so I took a lot of that energy and went inwards with it, and that's where kind of Rise Up sprung out of, was me working on myself and working to try to control my own mind about how I wanted to be seen and how I wanted the world and what I thought I could do. And I took all that, what I would say is fairly negative energy, and tried to refocus it into something that was beautiful. And that's what kind of Rise Up meant to me. And so that's also part of the reason why there's the black fist on the bag. And I really do feel like it like harkens back to like bread lines and, you know, community. There's a lot of stuff that we do besides making bread, you know, whether it's giving back to the community, whether it's supporting, whether it's feeding the homeless, whether it's going to schools and trying to teach kids that they don't have to buy into the concept of what the world kind of pushes onto them of what they have to be. So yeah, that's what Rise Up means. That's where the name came from.